Hello, it's me, Mike, with HPDS. I will be going over Exodus 1 in this video, so this will be a study in Exodus chapter 1. So before I get started, I'll go ahead and do as I normally do, and I'll go ahead and say the Lord's Prayer. I'll say, Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. May your kingdom come, and may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Please give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our debt, as we forgive those in debt to us. And Lord, lead us not into temptation, but instead deliver us from the evil one. Amen. So, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future uh, Bible studies, chapter by chapter Bible studies. So, as I get into Exodus 1, let me go ahead and give you kind of a quick background. If you remember, Genesis was the first book of the Bible, so Exodus is moving into as the second book of the Bible. And the first book of the Bible was obviously, we started off with the creation in the first few chapters, and then we went into the fall of man through Adam and Eve and how death was introduced and curses came along, and there were some blessings, and then there was the flood that Noah survived. But we remember that there was a flood that basically changed the whole world, and God gave us, afterwards, the rainbows appeared. And while that flood had occurred, Noah had a bunch of animals. He was on an ark. It took him about, he had spent about 100 years to go through this. And then over the course of a year, the whole world is flooded and drains, and everybody dies except for the people and the animals saved through Noah. And then after that, we start seeing God promises them, remember in early Genesis, that people would only live to 120 years old. And then over some of the next few chapters, we see that people do in fact start dying younger. And we come to the story of Abraham, who also dies much younger than his forefathers, such as Noah. Noah and Shem lived to be very old people, and Abraham did not make it anywhere near that age. But then we read the story of Abraham, and we come across his sons. We come across Isaac, and then Isaac has a couple of sons, Esau and Jacob. And Jacob is, his name is changed into Israel, and Israel has a son named Joseph. Israel has 12 sons, in fact, and Israel has a son named Joseph. Joseph is sold by his own brothers into captivity, only to be taken by the Lord to Egypt, where he becomes Pharaoh. And in time, he saves many people's lives because of a dream and during the famine. And then he's reunited with his family at the end of the book of Genesis, and they all move to Egypt, or they all stay in Egypt. But meanwhile, this family was getting promised by the Lord that they would inherit the land of Canaan, and they are now in the land of Egypt. And we're going to read in Exodus, start that this is going to be sometime later, and Moses is one of the children's far off later in the future. And if you remember in Genesis, I can't remember the exact chapter, but in Genesis, Abraham does have a dream, and in that dream, he is told that his children, will live as strangers in a foreign land for 400 years, and they would be afflicted. And but then God would show, he would judge that nation that afflicted them. And this is now that 400 years. This is that 400 years later, they've been afflicted, and Moses is going to take them out of Egypt. And that's what the book of Exodus will ultimately be about. And Moses is one of the sons of Israel. So let me read an outline of Exodus 1 before I actually read the chapter. And let's see. So in Exodus 1, what we'll see is from verses 1 to 7, we're going to see that the children of Israel are thriving in Egypt. And then in verses 8 through 14, we're going to see that a new king of Egypt arises and begins to afflict the children of Israel. So there's going to be a new king, whereas in Genesis, the Pharaoh really loved Joseph, and he let Joseph do all sorts of things, and he even let him go out and bury his own father, and But we're going to see that this king doesn't remember any of those people, and he doesn't care about these people. So verses 15 through 22, that will be the end of the chapter. We're going to see that the king of Egypt's policy to kill the children of Israel. So we're going to see that in verses 15 through 22 that the king of Egypt, this Pharaoh, he's going to be trying to kill these children of Israel. So I'll go ahead and start reading the chapter now. Let me get set up. Into my King James Version. All right. And here we are. Exodus 1 reads, Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin. Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful, and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, When ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives, and said unto them, Why have ye done this thing, and have saved the men children alive? And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. All right, that is Exodus 1 in its entirety out of the King James Version. And what did we see here? Like I said, the verses 1 through 7, we saw the children of Israel and how they're basically thriving in Egypt since this time that Israel showed up. And Joseph was there, and ever since then they've just been thriving, because remember, God had promised them that they would become, his seed would become like the stars, like the dust of the earth. He'd said they would be countless; you couldn't count them. Um, and so this is them in that time period. That is exactly what is happening. They're just thriving out there in Egypt. Um, and we're seeing we're given a recap of the people that went with Israel to Egypt, which was his 12 sons, and it talks about well how Joseph was already out there, and so that's what we kind of go over another little quick genealogy again, but. And then again, we saw in 8 verses 8 through 14, we saw the king of Egypt that doesn't know anything about them, and he says, "Oh, these guys they're getting too big and powerful for us. We got to deal wisely with them. So we got to be like, we got to do something about them." And then in verses 15 through 22, at the end, you see what he does end up trying to do. He says, "You got to kill them. Go ahead and kill these people. Kill the boys. If you see a boy, kill him." And of course, the midwives they can't really go through with it, and they come up with excuses. Oh, they're lively, something about that. They don't need the midwives. They got their own midwives. They take care of themselves. Kind of like this. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's kind of just, you know, seems a little bit funny to me. But they're just saying that these women, you know, and they didn't want to go through with the king of Egypt, but well, what the king of Egypt commanded them to do. But um, nonetheless, it seems like they eventually do start having to comply with these orders because eventually it seems that we're going to see in the next couple of chapters about Moses and what happens with him. But let me go ahead and go through this chapter. I'll go through it verse by verse and we'll see what the Holy Spirit brings. So let me get this opened up. Okay, so let's see. So once again, like I said, verses 1 through 7, we're going to see about these children of Israel again. So here they are. They're coming into Egypt, every man in his household that came with them. So here's a recap of them. Remember, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Then you got the next one, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. So these are all the tribes. These are the names of the future tribes coming up. But they're keeping track of the names. And this is many years later, though, and it's just going over a recap of them. So there are 70 souls because Joseph was already in Egypt. So if we remember, I could probably pull it up. Let me see. There is a genealogy here that I'm looking of. I believe this is it. So we see Jacob's descendants. So these are all his children: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Gad, Asher, Joseph, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali. And so we're seeing if we count through all these, apparently there's something like 70 people. And this gives me another, it says Genesis 46:26 says that 66 descendants excludes Onan, Joseph, his two sons, but includes Dinah. In Genesis 46:27, 70 includes Joseph, his two sons, and Jacob himself. So there's kind of some weird things going on with these numbers, but the numbers seem to be pretty much accurate. They're holding up, and that's what they're just trying to say, that there was about 70 people that showed up with him, or 70 people that was already, let's see, so and all the souls were 70 for Joseph was in Egypt already. So that's why Joseph is included in that one, like we said, like this picture says. It says 70 includes Joseph, his two sons, and Jacob himself. So that means that the 70 right here, because Joseph was in Egypt already. So and it may mention that 66 people showed up at first. So, but anyway, it's just keeping records. Like I said, these are real accurate records from thousands of years ago, and God was really keeping track of them really well. And it's like I said, it's a feat that is still not rivaled to this day. It has been lost. This information, we've tried to do it ourselves since Jesus, and I guarantee you that most people cannot find their lineage back to the time of Jesus. It's just, I don't think it's possible. I don't think anybody's got those records. Only God has those records, and I'm pretty sure He's withholding them at the moment until He returns. But here it is. Here he is keeping track of these records from so many years ago. Like I said, I've made mention in past videos that people love to defend science and talk so highly of science, But history right here, this is in the Bible, this is historical records, and people turn this into a myth. This is a myth. This is detailed records that you can choose to believe. So just like you're not allowed to choose to believe that gravity is you can't unbelieve gravity. You can't unbelieve the universe. You can't unbelieve these other things, but you can't question those things or you're a fool. But here you are given historical records, and they call these very detailed, accurate records um, beliefs. These are considered beliefs to a lot of people. But I digress again, so I'll continue going forward. And then it just mentions that Joseph died and all his brethren died. And if you remember the end of Exodus chapter, I'm pretty sure it's chapter 50 right there. He does die in Genesis 50. He dies, and he dies at the age of, I believe, 110 years old. Yes, and so his father Israel died at 147 years old. Joseph here, the son of Israel, dies at 110 years old. And once again, we're getting back into that concept that from Genesis 6, if you remember from Genesis 6, there is 6:3, verse 6:3 says something along the lines of God will not contend with us, and man's age will be 120 years. So here he is dying, and like I said, I've made mention it all throughout Genesis what was going on, but um, here he is. He dies at 110 years old, and so people are no longer living those long ages. God says He's only contending with us for 120 years. So everybody dies. So that's what's going on here. They all die. But the children stayed out there in Egypt, and they were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly. And the land was filled with them. So they were filling up Egypt very well. So let me see if I can get this. Here's a map right here of kind of what they were at. They remember they went to this Goshen area. So they had come all the way from pretty much Hebron over here. Then he made their way because these are the Hebrons. That's why they're called the Hebrews. They were kind of really dwelling in that spot right there. They came all the way up here, brought all their stuff, came to dwell in the land of Goshen over here. And so we see, and I believe these names Pithom and kind of were familiar somewhere. I think we read about these somewhere here, so I'll have to keep that in mind. But here they are, that's where they're at, and they just kind of stay there, and they're multiplying. And let's see, but here goes. So now we're moving into the second section that I spoke of, which is the verses 8 through 14. And it's telling us, look, here's a new king that doesn't know Joseph, and he says unto his people, come on, let's see. Says the people, like I said, the children are more and mightier than we. So the Egyptians, it really gets to a point that these Egyptians realize that, hey, these sons of Israel, these children of Israel are real. There's a lot of them over here. You know, they got all kinds of power. They're mightier than we are, and we got to do something about them. So here they are doing something about them. So the king of Egypt says, let's go ahead and start, killing their children. Well, first off, before he does anything, mind you, he's gonna start afflicting them with burdens. So you see right here, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. So you see that it says that he's telling his people that we got to do something about them, unless they multiply and it comes to pass that they might come to war against us or join our enemies and fight against us. So they're really kind of concerned about their military power against them. And so what they do, for some reason, this is again, this is just bad philosophy, I suppose. When if you want to conquer somebody, humans, if they want to make somebody do something or they're threatened, here they are, the people are he's gonna, let's afflict them with burdens. So here's the government saying, let's afflict them with burdens. And he kind of makes them build treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses, and that's where I mentioned that. Here it is, Pithom and Ramses over here. So they make these kind of towns up here too, and you will see that it ends up being kind of forced labor over here. So he's really employing them. He's really making them build all these things, and and it says right here that they made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. So he's making the people work really hard. They're working really, really hard. Um, and it becomes an unfavorable situation. And it says here that their lives become bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. So they're making them do all the rough jobs over here. So that's what we're seeing them. They're basically, and we see this in a, and I find this kind of funny, but I won't delve into it too far, but here in the United States, this would be considered like they're immigrants. So here they are, these children of Israel are immigrants, and the Egyptians are making them do all the hard work. So they're making the immigrants do all the field work, and I just find that funny in the United States, coming out of the United States. But anyway, continuing forward without expanding on that, we see that the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives. So this is where we're getting into 15 through 22. The end of the chapter is 22. So starting at verse 15, he's going to tell them, go ahead and start killing the newborn baby boys. But before that, like I said, he's really sticking it to them, they're really getting into like their economic policies where these guys were making them go out and do all the work, and they were starting to be taskmasters over them. So taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, to make sure that they were getting things done, make sure they had quotas. They're doing the whole, in this, in our modern day and age, when we see videos, or not videos, but how do I say this? But when we see depictions of this time era, we often see the Egyptian with the slave whip, cracking a whip on them. So that's what was going on. He was cracking a whip on them. And so then he goes even further, and he speaks to the midwives. And look, there's a woman named, there's another record, and the name of her other, here's another record, so many records, all these names. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and you see them, so when you see them having the baby, as soon as, when they're basically about to have the children, when they're, go in and find out if it's a boy. And if it's a boy, kill him. And if it's a daughter, go ahead and let them live. So they're over here, and the king goes pretty high up there, and he says, kill the boys and let the daughters live. So here's a king again, and we've seen what God does with kings that are not so great, like such as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, when in Genesis, when God goes and destroys them after they've been running around calling themselves kings. Here's a man in Egypt who is acting like a king, but he is once again one of the bad kings, one of these guys that God is clearly going to afflict. But here he is deciding that it is in his power to go ahead and kill the children. I'm going to go ahead and kill the children, the boys, is what he's saying. Go ahead and kill the boys. But luckily, we see that the midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men, children, and lives. So we see that the midwives, these people are clearly being affected by these children of Israel. So if we remember from Genesis, they were very favorable with the Egyptians have always been favorable to these children of Israel, this line of Abraham, because even when Abraham showed up with Sarah, the Egyptians, Pharaoh loved his wife, like he loved her so much, and he tried to take Sarah for his own, but God afflicted them, and basically the Pharaoh gave Abraham a whole bunch of stuff, and sent Abraham and Sarah away and told them, kind of, y'all guys got to get out of here. You guys are a little bit, it was too much for him. God, God was, they liked him too much. They had to send him away because they liked him too much, is what the Egyptians were, that's what happened. The Egyptians liked Abraham and Sarah too much. They had to send them away because God, God was with them and afflicting them and protecting them. And he would not let these Egyptians take from the line of Abraham. So here we go again, where it's kind of going to be the same concept where this king is starting to say, these people kind of belong to me now, when in reality, these people belong to the Lord. And so, but they were very favorable towards each other. And then once we get into the story, remember getting into Joseph, so many years later, Joseph himself was very favorable in Egypt. He was the Pharaoh. He rose to the prominence of Pharaoh, and the people loved him. He was a very famous guy. The people were very, based off the story, they were all into his drama. The people lived, and they all heard about him. They all heard about his happenings and his going ons, and about his brothers and his father, and they all very much loved Joseph. And so when Joseph's father died, Israel died, and he took the bones of Israel back to the land of Canaan. The Egyptians went with him because they loved him so much. They were so favorable of him. And they mourned with him openly out there. So the Egyptians went out to the land of Canaan and mourned out there in the land of Canaan. So it was very intimate. These people were very close to each other. And so that means they were probably very good friends with each other. A lot of them were friends with each other. Here we are, the midwives were, clearly the children of Israel had also, with the help of God, they'd been spreading the knowledge of the Lord, and they had remembered the stories of Joseph more than likely, and been hearing about these things, and they knew they spoke with God, and they knew there was a God, and so forth. But they definitely, God was definitely with them, and it clearly says that these midwives were afraid of doing this. They weren't going to kill these children that had saved them and had been so close to them and had been given to them by the Lord, or had been brought into the land by the Lord. Even though it was, that's just what it was. So they weren't going to do it. So they didn't really do it. But of course, the king of Egypt gets upset and says, "Why have you done this thing?" and saved the men. So of course, the king of Egypt is very mad that he says, "I commanded you to kill the boys, and y'all didn't kill none of the boys. And why is that?" So he's really upset because, he says, "Why is this not happening?" And we read that the midwives tell him that, well, they come up with an excuse. They're lively and are delivered. Ere the midwives, they come before, we don't get it around to them because they don't need us. They, we try to help them, but they're rigorous and live, they're lively is what it says. So there, it's kind of, once again, I find it funny because here in the United States, it's the same concept of immigrants, and the immigrants that are, it's just, I find that funny, the kinds of things that anyway, I won't expand anymore, but it's funny to me. Here they are just coming up with some excuse saying they don't really need us. They're lively, their children just come out. They don't have any problems with their children. Their children just come out. And so you see that God dealt well with the midwives. So God was protecting these midwives, even though this king of Egypt over here is clearly ruthless enough to exit, to hey, I'm gonna, you guys got to kill some babies over here. That's how ruthless this king is. And if he's that ruthless, what do you think he's gonna do to these midwives, right? But for not obeying his order, right? You guys aren't listening to me. I should kill you guys too. But clearly, this Pharaoh somehow didn't have it in him, I guess. But God was with him, and God was with them, and that's why it says that God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed. So even the Egyptians were being the Egyptians. That's why these Egyptian women didn't want to do anything to the Israel women, because they knew they were being blessed as well. Everybody, their economies, everything, their lives, their everything was going great between these two nations. Why should we do anything horrible to these people? It just doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense to these midwives. And they were afraid of God, what God would do to them if they did start just killing these children. And because they didn't do this horrible thing, we see that God was treating even the midwives, even the Egyptian women were being treated well by the Lord. And he even made them houses. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged us. So we see that God is, he's making these midwives, he's making these people, he built them houses. He was treating very well with them. So even though so you really see how right there Pharaoh is allowing something that he commanded these people to do. They did not do it. And those people are now thriving by God so much that God made them houses. So you would think that, like I said, the same kind of guy that could tell a person, if you could command somebody to go kill some babies, then you should be able to command some people to kill some little midwives that aren't doing what you tell them to do now. When you think so, but God was not letting that happen. He let them live good lives, And but so Pharaoh had to kind of back down. So he backs down, and what he says is, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. So he comes up with some other thing that he basically says, I'm gonna kill your sons. You just better get rid of them. Just better get rid of them, because your sons are gonna be treated very badly, and you should just cast them into the river. That's what he's telling them. Because I'm gonna, clearly he was making it known to his people that he did not like these children of Israel, and that he wanted them dead. And that's what he was telling his people. He was telling his people, you guys need to take it upon yourselves to, if you guys can't kill them, then cast them into the river and let them die on their own terms, without God, is what he's with. And that's what he's kind of saying. It's still dramatic, but he's making it kind of less severe. And he's still saying, but you can keep the daughters alive. So this guy, this Pharaoh over here, is the complete opposite of the pharaohs we came across in Genesis. Whereas all the pharaohs really love these children of Israel, this Pharaoh hates them. He hates them very much. So I'm gonna go ahead, and that's Exodus 1 in its entirety. Just um, but yeah, so that's what's going on, is that this is a new era. It's later on we see that the sons of Israel have all passed away. Joseph and his brothers have all passed away, but the people have still been very successful in Egypt, and the people of Egypt have really enjoyed their company and liked them there, and they've been good for the country. Remember, they saved the entire country in Genesis through Joseph. They basically saved the country, and so those were his family, and so they were as Egyptian as any of those people at this point. They were born there. They were being born there. They were not in the land of Canaan. Um, like God had not told them, had not yet commanded them to go back to the land of Canaan. He was really making an extended stay for these children out here in Israel. And then all of a sudden, this Pharaoh just he doesn't like them. He comes kind of, let's be honest, and the American word would be, I would call it like racist. He became very racist, and so he accepted these kind of racist defenses. The whole, like, oh, those, I guess I don't know what to tell you, Pharaoh. Those women are lively. They're like yeah, the little children just pop right out. They have no problem, which is kind of what we come across, where here in America we've got racist comments about all kinds of races, talking about how many children they have. and so forth. So it's the same concept. He becomes kind of racist, this Pharaoh, to the point of he starts, hey, kill the children, and if you can't kill the children, then throw them into the river. The boys, kill the boys. Get rid of these boys. Let's get rid of these boys. There's, can't have them anymore. And of course, what was Abraham and Israel, Jacob, yeah, I think it was Jacob had that same problem too. Isaac, I think, had it. All of them had this problem out there where they were concerned that, if they told the people out there that, hey, this is my wife, that they would be, oh, let's kill the man and take the wife. And that's what Abraham was afraid of. And so they ran around saying, oh, this is my sister. So Abraham did with Sarah. And now we're kind of seeing it right here, where that goes back to, that's what's being fulfilled now. Is now this king is basically saying, I'm tired of these uh, children of Israel. I kind of just want the women. I don't want the men of the Israelites. I just want the women. So let's keep the women, which is always what they were afraid of, taking the women. So and I do mention that quite a bit in Genesis, how it was real. Abimelech had that kind of problem too, where the people were out there in land of Canaan and out in Egypt were so vulgar and so out of, they were so violent and so forth, that they were willing to just take the women, kill the men and take the women, to do with those women as ever they pleased. That was the case. And here we are seeing it again. They're just outright, the king has become pretty much racist, and he starts mistreating them, starts making them do all the field work, all the laborious jobs, all the hard work. And on top of that, he put his own people as bosses over them, so that they could afflict them and be pretty rough on them. And then what did he do? Then he decides, go ahead and kill them or send them down the river. And that's where we leave off in Exodus 1. And we will pick up in Exodus 2 in a different video, and we'll see further. We'll see what's going on past that, and what eventually becomes of this concept of this law and this command that the Pharaoh has made upon his people, and we'll see what becomes of it. So again, I'd like to remind you to please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future chapter by chapter Bible study. And God bless you. And I pray that we all bless Jesus Christ, and that Jesus Christ blesses all of us. Amen.